Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. Greetings from the gutter. Holy hell, I hope you are having a better wildcard weekend than I am. Man, just so off on some of these games. I thought the Packers at 5.5 was a pretty good play. Jordan Love was just so bad. The Eagles, I had a chance to backdoor cover it at the end there, but I didn't deserve it. Eagles were clearly the right side to be on. And now the Bucks, too. I was really confident in the Bucks. That was one of my favorite plays of the weekend. I'm not really worried about the Bills-Broncos over. That one could have gone over. The Bills got boggled down in the red zone a couple times. That one could have gone over. But these last two, the Packers and the Bucks, what the hell? Wow. I am not in the highest of spirits right now. We're going to talk about Vikings-Rams on Monday night. Hopefully you guys are having a better weekend than I am, man. Let's do it.
Something I want to add real quick, and this goes out to Washington Commanders fans. Some of you are talking some shit, and you've earned the right. You've earned the right. I look like a moron right now. I really like the Bucks, and you guys won, and you earned the win. It wasn't a lucky win. You guys played well. Defense played well. Jaden Daniels made some throws. I'm not apologizing. I'm fading the shit out of you guys for the remainder of the playoff. I'm not apologizing. You got this one. I'm not apologizing.
All right, Minnesota's on the road in L.A. here, but this one's actually being played in Arizona because of the fires there. The Rams are catching 2.5 points. Total sitting at 47.5. I do see a couple 48s out there. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty split on this one, about 50-50 on the tickets, about 50-50 on the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some playoff trends here. It has not been a profitable decision to back the Vikings in the playoffs. They're 2-4 against the spread in their last 6 playoff games, 4-12 against the spread in their last 16 road playoff games, 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 playoff games as favorites. So again, not a profitable spot to back Minnesota historically. Meanwhile, the Rams are 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 playoff games as underdogs. So historically, this would probably be a spot to back the Rams. But anyway, we're not interested in the past. Let's talk about this matchup right here. We'll start with the Week 8 Thursday Night Football game. The Rams won that one at home, 30-20. They were catching a full 3 at home. I did have the Rams in this one. Something that's important to point out about this game, and it was one of the main reasons I bet the Rams. You had the Vikings coming off the biggest game of the season just 4 days before that against the Lions, a game where, they got the fumble recovery, took the lead, and then lost on a field goal. Biggest game of the year, heartbreak. Then 4 days later, they fly out to LA and play the Rams. It was a terrible spot for Minnesota. We do have to point that out when we're looking at this game. So can we expect a repeat performance? Are the Rams going to beat Minnesota again? Well, on the offensive side of the ball, Minnesota does have the edge if we're using the full season numbers here. They're 11th in yards per play, 11th in success rate. The Rams defense 26th and 25th. So on paper, based on the full season, the Vikings should not have problems moving the ball in this Rams defense. We do have to point out that the Rams defense has been playing slightly better though. Weeks 13 through 17, they're allowing 16 points per game, 5.7 yards per play. Success rate is still up close to 48%, which isn't great. But no question, they're playing much better defense in the last handful of games than they were for the first 2/3 of the season. So LA's defense has looked slightly better recently. I'm definitely a little worried about their run defense, though. In the last 2 games, 5.33 yards per carry, over 53% success rate per rush, 120 rushing yards allowed per game. That was against Arizona and Seattle. In the 2 games before that, they looked great against the run. That was against a 49ers team missing its entire offensive line and the Jets, who haven't been able to run the ball all season. So I really don't know how I feel about the Rams' run defense. It looked really bad in the last couple games, looked really good in the 2 games before that. Minnesota tends to stick to zone runs as well, which actually plays into the weakness of this Rams defense. They're 24th in yards per carry allowed, 25th in success rate per rush against zone runs. So maybe the Vikings can run the ball on this Rams run defense. They look pretty shitty in the last couple games. That being said, I really don't know how I feel about the Vikings run game right now. In their last 3 games, 4.5 yards per carry is pretty cool. Success rate per rush is under 34%, 92 rushing yards per game. In the 4 games before that, it was better. 4.7 yards per carry, 43.7% success rate, but we're talking about the last 3 games. Minnesota's been struggling to run the ball. Now, you can point at the fact they played Seattle, Green Bay, and Detroit. Some tough defenses, I guess, even though Detroit's pretty injured. But this concerns me. If we're counting on Minnesota to run the ball on the Rams here, they haven't really been running the ball. So if you ask me a direct question, Kyle, do you think the Vikings can run the ball in this Rams defense? I really don't know how to answer it. I think the Rams can put up a fight. We have seen them play a couple good games somewhat recently. I don't really think the Vikings run game is very good. It's tough to say. And honestly, you can mirror that for a lot of aspects of this game. I think the Vikings may struggle to run the ball because the Vikings have been consistently struggling to run the ball. But what about the matchup for Sam Darnold against the Rams defense? And right off the bat, I like this right here. We know Sam Darnold loves to throw the ball downfield. 12.5% of his pass attempts are considered deep passes. That plays directly into the weakness of the Rams defense. They're 29th in defensive efficiency against the deep pass. So you love the start to this if you plan on backing the Vikings here. All that being said, I gotta say I'm finding it a little hard to unsee what I saw last week. That was the biggest game of the year for Sam Darnold on the road against a Detroit defense that's really struggled against the pass. I mean, the Lions might be one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL right now. On paper, in terms of passing production allowed, they're one of the worst with all those injuries. Sam Darnold was terrible. I mean, this stat line almost doesn't even do it justice. He was so bad. 18 of 41, 166 yards, 55.5 passer rating. Just wow. In weeks 1 through 17, Sam Darnold had an off-target throw percentage of 14%, 5th best in the NFL. Last week against the Lions, 24%, 26th in the NFL. So how do we go about making a prediction here? I mean, if normal Sam Darnold shows up, Rams have been a little susceptible to the downfield throws. Sam Darnold loves to throw them. I mean, it should be a pretty good matchup for Sam Darnold. If normal Sam Darnold shows up, but if Sam Darnold, who has the shits in these big games and you can't trust him, shows up, I mean, I'm not sure if we can trust that version of Sam Darnold that we saw in Week 18. I don't know if we can trust that version of Sam Darnold against any defense in the NFL. And I mentioned before, the Rams have been playing better defense as of late. Check this out. These are the Rams' numbers against the pass in their last 4 games. 6.4 yards per pass attempt allowed, under 236 passing yards allowed per game. Average opponent pass rating of 87.7. Not that these numbers are elite, but they are playing decent defense against the pass. And look at the opponents. The 49ers, the Jets, Arizona, Seattle. It's not like they're playing scrubs. So, I mean, the Rams are playing better defense against the pass. I don't know what I think about Sam Darnold right now. So, I mean, as a whole on this side of the ball, there's a lot of question marks. I wouldn't be surprised that the Rams defense plays pretty well here. They haven't looked all that bad recently. I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Darnold has the jitters here in these big games. I guess if you asked me to make a prediction, I think the Rams defense might play pretty well. Now let's talk about the matchup on the other side. We got the Rams offense against the Vikings defense, and on paper, Minnesota should have the slight edge here. Vikings defense on the season, 9th in yards per play, 6th in success rate. The Rams offense, 15th and 10th. So slight edge to Minnesota in terms of full season raw data. What concerns me here for the Rams offense is the recent production, or the recent lack of production, we should say. On weeks 11 through 14, the Rams offense was looking pretty good. The run game seemed to be returning. They were averaging 28.3 points per game, 6.8 yards per play, over 54% overall success rate. I mean, there's a game against Philly in there. There's a game against Buffalo in there. So it's not like they played all bad teams. But in their last 3 games, 14.7 points per game, 4.9 yards per play. The Rams are coming into this one playing their worst offensive football this season right now. The run game has completely disappeared on the Rams. In their last 2 games against Seattle and Arizona, they averaged just 3.6 yards per carry, under 77 rushing yards per game, 35.7% success rate per rush. So against Minnesota, who has an elite run defense, or I should say had an elite run defense for most of the season, you'd say there's no way the Rams could run the ball in this game. That being said, I mean, you look at the Vikings numbers against the run recently, and it's actually not good at all. In the last 6 games, they're allowing 4.7 yards per carry, over 127 rushing yards per game, 43.8% success rate per rush. That's against Arizona, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, Green Bay, Detroit. Now, you might point at this graphic and say, Kyle, Ivan Pace Jr. didn't play in 4 of these games. And you'd be right. That's the Vikings' most important defensive piece against the run. He missed 4 of these games. But Ivan Pace Jr. has been back for the last 2 games, and they're still getting run on. 5.1 yards per carry, 141 rushing yards per game in their last 2. 38.6% success rate per rush is better, but still they're struggling to stop the run with Ivan Pace Jr. back on the field here. Now, the counterpoint to this, if you're betting the Vikings, would be look at the opponents. They played Green Bay and they played Detroit. 2 offenses with great offensive lines. So those are 2 of the best offensive lines in the NFL. That being said, when it comes to creating space in the run game, now that the Rams' offensive line has been healthy in the second half of the season, they're looking great in terms of creating space in the run game. 9th in adjusted line yards, 5th in run blocking grade, 11th in yards before contact. So the Vikings defense is going to see yet another offensive line that's great at generating push. Now, the Rams do tend to run more gap concept blocking schemes. They're 9th in the NFL in frequency. That plays into the strength of the Vikings defense. They're 2nd in yards per carry allowed, 12th in success rate against gap concept blocking schemes. So you like that if you plan on betting the Vikings. And you also like the fact that back in week 8, when we saw these two teams play, the Rams did struggle to run the ball in that game. 3.8 yards per carry, under 35% success rate per rush, 111 yards on the ground in that one. And that was against Minnesota in a terrible spot, coming off the big Detroit game just 3 days later. So the Rams were unable to run the ball against a Vikings defense that was in a terrible spot. That being said, we do have to point out, since we have this graphic up of this week 8 game, the Rams were without Steve Avila, their starting left guard in that game. And if you remember, the Rams offensive line was really banged up for the first half of the season. I think they did have 4 starters in for this one, but as a whole, the Rams offensive line, they were in and out for a lot of those games. The Rams offensive line in much better shape right now than it was 2 months ago. So another matchup where if you ask me a direct question, Kyle, do you think the Rams can run the ball in Minnesota? I'm like, I really don't know. Part of me thinks yes, but I can see some strong angles for no. This is a tough one, man. I do think the Rams are able to run the ball in Minnesota a little bit. Doesn't look like that run defense is quite the same, even with Ivan Pace Jr. back. But who knows? I mean, like I said, there are some strong angles that support the Vikings defensive front here. Tough to call. Now, what about the matchup for Matt Stafford? And it gets interesting here. So number one, Stafford's looked like shit. In weeks 11 through 14, I mentioned how the Rams offense was playing pretty well. Passing numbers look excellent, over 60% success rate per dropback. In weeks 15 through 17, however, that was not the case. Just 153 passing yards per game, 5.9 yards per attempt, average pass rating under 77. So Matt Stafford definitely not coming into this game playing his best football at all, and he's got to deal with the Vikings pass rush here. They're 7th in pressure rate, 12th in adjusted sack rate. Matt Stafford, one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL under pressure. When you give him a clean pocket, he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's really struggled under pressure this year. 27th in yards per attempt, 38th in pass rating, 35th in turnover-worthy play rate. And in addition to that, the Vikings are also great at taking away those short throws that Stafford loves. They're 3rd in the NFL in defensive efficiency against the short pass. That accounts for 48.2% of Matt Stafford's pass attempts. So at the moment, it's looking like a pretty rough matchup here for Matt Stafford. That being said, there are a few things I really like here for Stafford. Number one, we mentioned the Vikings pass rush and how it should be a problem, but Matt Stafford's been great against the blitz. The Vikings blitz a lot. Flores loves the blitz. So the plays where the Vikings blitz packages are unable to get home, Matt Stafford should have plenty of opportunities to make throws here. 6th in completion percentage, 7th in yards per attempt, 10th in the NFL in pass rating against the blitz. So yes, the Vikings blitz packages will get home on a lot of plays, but the plays that they don't, Stafford should be able to make some throws. And also, what else does Brian Flores do? Zone coverage, 7th in frequency, 3rd in cover 2 frequency, 1st in 2 high safety frequency. Matt Stafford has great splits against all of those sets. Against zone coverage, 11th in completion percentage, 18th in yards per attempt, 9th in passer rating. Against cover 2, 6th, 27th, and 17th. Against 2 high safeties, 13th, 14th, and 13th. And you can see on the left side of those graphics, better against 2 high safeties than 1 high safeties, better against cover 2 than his overall stats. So this is actually a favorable matchup for Matt Stafford coverage-wise against this Minnesota defense. The problem is, like I said earlier, he hasn't been playing well at all. I do think the Rams are going to try to run the ball a little bit. The Vikings have been a little vulnerable. As a whole, though, betting this game, I do have a bet down. I bet under 47.5 at open. I thought it was going to close lower than that, but it's still sitting at 47.5. In fact, you can get 48. I probably will put a few dollars on the Rams. I trust Matt Stafford in a big playoff game a lot more than I trust Sam Darnold. Like I said before, I really can't unsee what I saw last week, and you shouldn't overreact to one game, but it was alarming. He missed wide open throws. He was clearly uncomfortable. I mean, he didn't look like he belonged on the field in that game against the Lions. Matt Stafford, on the other hand, is a guy who's played in dozens of these big games, so probably going to bet the Rams. I do have a bet on the under already. Probably bet the Rams after I record this. As I said before, I'm definitely not seeing the board clearly right now. Really having some problems. Can't seem to string wins together. So please, if you're tailing, do so responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me. We're having the live show at 4 p.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's turn this weekend around, man. It's been a rough one. Yeah, talk to you guys later.